Hi, I am Hope Goins, the author of The Adventures of Chloe and Chris, The Three Branches of Government. Catch us on So Booking Cool.
So booking, so booking, so booking cool.
It's so motherfucking cool to listen to So Booking Cool.
Welcome to So Booking Cool, it's Jewel B. Today's guest holds more than 15 years of experience in public service and has been recognized in the press for her work in Congress and leading one of the most diverse staff on Capitol Hill. She is responsible for advancing policy and legislation. She is the Majority Staff Director of the United States House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security, where she helps to keep the country functioning, safe, secure, and resilient. The speaker and writer is also a published author. Her debut is the first book in a series titled The Adventures of Chloe and Chris, The Three Branches of Government, which topped the Amazon's new releases list and was number 1 in the children's government books and children's politics and government. The educational series is dedicated to teaching young minds the importance of government, its role, their role as citizens, and everything in between. Here with us today, she is Hope Goins. Stay tuned for our conversation only on So Booking Cool. You succeeded in really building your career and climbing up the ladder. What advice do you have for people who want to do the same?
Well, I would say a couple things. Yes, I succeeded in climbing up the ladder, but I didn't succeed by myself. I sought out mentors. I sought out people that I could look to, kind of see what their careers were like. No two careers are just equally the same, but looking at other people and seeing what their careers was like, and also kind of what I wanted in the space that I wanted to be. So I sought out a few mentors, officially, unofficially. I don't think I ever just have really been to someone and said, will you be my mentor? But sought out a few mentors. Also realized that things just weren't going to happen overnight, that things were not going to happen in very quickly. But they did happen quickly. They happened in the time that they were supposed to happen. But realizing that I couldn't go to bed tonight and wake up where I want to be tomorrow, not in the environment that I was working in, It's just not necessarily the way it is on Capitol Hill where I work.
When you were going through that time, did you realize that, it's not going to happen overnight for me? But
yeah. I think I did. Like I said, looking at other people's careers, noticing that some people, it didn't happen overnight for them. It probably wouldn't happen overnight for me, but also the ability to do well needed a little bit of seasoning and functioning, and the ability to sit still in one place and grow and go to the next spot.
Okay. Yes. So when did you first become interested in government?
So interested in working in government or just interested in government? I would say I was always interested. I've been interested in news, breaking news, trivia, historical facts. So that would encompass government. I never set out on a path to say that I was going to work in the government. That was not anything that was a plan for me. It's just something that kind of happened.
Oh, okay. And how did it happen? With council and internship?
Kind of, yeah. I never interned in the legislative branch. I did have an externship with federal judiciary. In addition to that, I also I did not. I had an internship with the federal judiciary, never worked in the executive branch before, but I did. I reached out to my hometown congressman just to have a quick conversation. He and I went to the same alma mater. So I reached out to him to have a conversation with him. And then over the course of that conversation, it led to the fact he told me that there were some opportunities in his office.
Okay. Yeah. So you make it clear that your series, The Adventures of Chloe and Chris, educates youth about civics education, but without the fluff and agenda. So tell us more about that.
So the thing is the Constitution is the Constitution. It is a historical document. It is what as people say, the law of the land, how the United States functions. Therefore, it's not anything that it's Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, and that's what my book is on. My book is essentially based on the foundation of the United States government, without any politics or anything else. It is straight the historical document that our government was founded upon, our principles were founded upon. And the reason that I did it in that manner is that people don't remember fifth, and it was said in high school. People used to come to me and say, how you like working for Obama? I'm like, I don't know. I've never worked for Obama. I've never worked in the executive branch. I work for Congress. And they don't know the difference between Congress. I live in DC. Walk down the street, many of people have pointed at the Capitol and said, isn't that where the president lives? And that's just not remembering the lessons that were taught. In addition to that, there is a decline in civics education across the United States. And that decline also lends to a weak education and an uptick in misinformation, disinformation, and the facts not being presented. Then that's where you have a convergence that will cause a decline in our democracy.
Yeah. Why do you think it's so easy for a lot of people to forget that education on history and government from school?
I think they don't see it. I don't think they really see it applied in their everyday lives, or think they see it applied in their everyday lives. Of course, the laws, policies, things that are put in place, decisions made by the Supreme Court, they affect Americans across the board. But I think we go about our day. We go about our families. We go about our jobs, and we don't necessarily think, I know for me, I never really realized people worked in the Capitol when I was younger. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, that was never, I'm from Mississippi, so I wasn't like coming to DC, and I didn't know that people actually worked in the Dome to know that there were people actually writing laws. And I don't think that people think about the impact, the daily impact, not only from from the federal government, but from their city and state politics, city and state governments, until it actually directly affects them, or until they see something like a crisis or something impactful happens in their family.
Wow. What age do you think most people probably are when they will start paying a little bit more attention to government again?
I don't know. I know some people pay attention, but not everyone pays attention to politics. But still, that is based in a lot of times, strong beliefs, strong personal beliefs, especially now when politics is put more in your face. Through social media, but they still don't pay attention to actually how the government works. I'm on social media. There are things that people have said about presidents can't do. There are things that people don't realize the impacts of the Supreme Court. So I don't necessarily know if there is an age to where it can come back to people. That's why I wrote this book, and I wrote it on the children's level. So hopefully when children and their families read it together, they can at least get the foundation. Or to the parents, their memory gets jogged. And I've had a lot of people tell me, oh yeah, like my memory really got jogged because these are things that I forgot.
How does that make you feel when they tell you that?
I feel good because that shows that my book is serving its purpose.
Yeah. By the way, how did you come across Priceless Publishing?
Priceless Publishing, once again, just doing research, looking at the research that, looking online, also looking at testimonials. The same way you come across a lot of things that Priceless Publishing has been very good for me and very good to me. So looking at testimonials, also doing interviews. I interviewed the owner. And also we had a conversation about my goals for my book and what I wanted to see happen from my book.
What was the most important goal to you?
Aside from getting it, I want to get it in the hands of readers across the nation, which I've done. Another goal of mine, we haven't met it yet, but we're getting there, is my book. My book belongs in animation and belongs in the metaverse.
Ooh, well, that could definitely happen.
I believe so.
Yeah. When you were writing the adventures of Chloe and Chris, did you stick to a schedule? Did you ever have to go through writer's block? What can you
I went through a lot of writer's block. It took me 4 years to write the book. I went through a lot of writer's block. Of course, I have a professional career. I went through phases of, one thing for me is even just having to narrow down the topics, narrow it down to language, the language for children, breaking that down. Making sure, one thing in children's books, making sure that you had to have like a virtue. The virtue in my book is balance. And also going back and forth with even like characters and character development. One thing that I was very adamant about was that my book would feature children. And I wanted it to feature children. There are a lot of wonderful, iconic children's books that personify objects, but it was my goal for my book to feature kids and to feature Black children. On the first book, there are less than 10% of children's books feature Black children. And I wanted to make sure that I also had a strong female lead.
Are the characters Chloe and Chris based on anyone?
Not really.
Not really? Okay. Yeah. How did you craft them?
I just crafted, I wanted to make sure I had children and a strong female lead. And so I was like, brother, sister. Yeah. And I wanted to make sure and I know families vary, the types of families vary across the board. I know there is no cookie cutter way, but I really wanted to make sure that they also had parents in their lives and that the parents were involved, just because when my book is read, I also want parents engaged.
Okay, yes, of course, absolutely. When it came to outlining the adventures of Chloe and Chris, do you already know what each book in the series is going to focus on?
Somewhat. I do. I still think, people still aren't that, people still would love to know more about each branch of government. People also would want to know about some historical facts about each branch of government, historical facts, who was the first Latina in Congress, who was the first Black woman in Congress, who was the first Black person in Congress, who was the first Black person on the Supreme Court. People want to know those things. So I'm thinking about incorporating some of that in future books, possibly, but the main focus will be, what is the function of this part of government?
Now, your book is helping to do this, but going back to what you said when you made a very good point, that people often forget that education about the government and about civics. So do you think children need to be told, hey, you really need to pay attention to this stuff now and try to lock this information in, really retain it, because there are some adults who do forget? Is that a conversation that we need to have with them?
I think I think you tell children you need to remember this, they're going to forget it. I think practical application is better. Showing them, getting the books out, looking at what they learn. A friend of mine's son did a book report on my book. And the most striking thing to him was, a senator has more time in office than a president. And that struck to him, looking at what stands out to them the most, and reinforcing that, and going back and just having those conversations. You could show them who their representatives are, show them who a senator is, or even just talk about it. Talk about how the United States isn't a dictatorship. It's not a monarchy. It is not that. It is a democracy, and how you have to have representation. Those things could be discussed. I don't think you have to say, remember this, because I don't think that would cause someone to remember. I think it's more like just having those conversations, pointing those things out. And then some things are just even looking at colors. I have a friend, her daughter is 2, and her daughter just enjoys the colors of the book. She enjoys going to them, looking at the colors, or even things you can identify with. Little girls seem to really enjoy looking at another little girl with 2 puffs.
Yeah, there's definitely like a connection there with kids. Mentorship, and you mentioned this earlier, is also something that is important to you. Why is it important for you to mentor others?
Because it's important to me because, for several reasons. On the policy making side, it's only fair to the country that I mentor people, and I mentor women, and I mentor people of color, because like I said, every law that is passed, I will never meet the people in Nebraska, the people in Wisconsin, the people in California. Those policies I've helped draft, I won't meet those people that it's affected, but I know it has affected them in some kind of way. So you have to have people sitting at the table that can bring the diverse ideas of this country, to say, hey, if you do this, then remember, in this part of the nation, historically, XYZ, they may not be able to achieve that. Or remember the history of this country, XYZ, that may equal I do a lot of intelligence, that may equal a certain type of surveillance for them, or that may trigger a civil rights issue. So knowing that and having that at the table really and truly does matter, because how are we to write laws about education, national security, science, technology, energy, and not have not have a representative of the people that it would affect at the table?
Was there somebody who had that conversation with you?
Yes.
Oh. How did that start? How did that conversation start? Did it start by you reaching out and showing an interest that you wanted to learn more? Or was it also them recognizing something in you?
No, people recognize something in me, but I also would say there are people that really and truly go around Washington, D.C., and that is their obligation. I'm not a unicorn in mentoring and making sure the table. There are, and it also is so few of us that actually get deep down into committee work or deep down into like that process. And there are several pipelines, and there are several people that are vested in that.
What are some of those pipelines?
The Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, they have a fellowship program. The Hispanic Caucus Institute has a program, and then several schools, several colleges and universities have pipeline programs.
Okay.
Now, but pipeline program isn't the only way, though, because I was never in one. but if someone is interested, I'd say, and doesn't have a pipeline program at their disposal, I just didn't apply for any. But if a person doesn't have a pipeline program at their disposal, then that person still should reach out and try their hardest to see how they can find a way in.
When they should try their hardest, does that include like contact?
Reaching out to everybody. We're more connected now. Getting on LinkedIn, finding their hometown representative, finding people that know people here and there. That's what I mean.
You're into your work, of course, but you also, like anybody, you like to have time to relax and enjoy other things. You're into, so tell us about some of those other hobbies and what other art forms do you enjoy? I know one of them is live performances.
I go to concerts a lot, play, travel. I travel. I want to get more into domestic travel. I want to see a lot of beautiful things in the United States. I hang out with friends. I do community service work, those things.
Wow. What is your favorite part of doing community service work?
Once again, the people so many people, like the people that I don't know, the people that won't have the ability to thank me, but will be affected in a positive way by my work.
Me, not actually knowing the people that you're impacting and affecting. How soon did you realize that? And do you think some people might see it as a thankless job, even though it's not, because of that?
I think I saw it very early on, but I just don't know. It's not thankless though. I may not meet the people that I affect, but when I travel and go through scanners at the airport, I know the legislation I've worked on that has improved airport security. I know the legislation I've worked on that does integrated, I know sometimes it can be annoying, integrated public alerts warnings on my iPhone. I know things that I've done to improve cybersecurity. So I know these things. So it can't be thankless. It's just the fact that so many people are affected. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm fine with the average Joe or Joanna in this country being affected by my work. That gives me a sense of pride.
When it came also to writing the book, who were some of your biggest cheerleaders when writing it?
Oh, I had some biggest cheerleaders and some biggest people to kick at me because it took a very long time. I had my friends, I had one of my coaches, Dima. She really helped out a lot. She asked a lot of questions each and every time we had a conversation. Those were some of the people that really and truly kept me on path. Another friend of mine, Dr. Key, she helped me because it was just more and more. And also, I would say the universe. There were times, things that would happen. I'm like, you know what? My book needs to be out. My book needs to be out. And honestly, that's really and truly how I just got it out. I was like, you know what? It's time to just bite the bullet and get this thing done.
Yeah. What were some of those moments where you'd be like, my book really needs to be out now?
January 6th, 2021. That was a moment. I would even say times during the 2020 presidential race when people have conversations about what the role of a president or a member of Congress. When I look on social media, when I look on the shade room and I see people not knowing the difference, I see things there. So almost anytime there's a national event, I see where there's a void. And I'm like, oh, my book could really be helpful here.
Do you think that people who have major platforms should at any point try to tell their audience hey, it's cool to pay attention to government and politics?
Yeah, because people that have major platforms like to talk about it. And sometimes they don't talk about it in the proper manner. They don't talk about funding and how to get funding, and like I said, the role of a president or the role of a member of Congress. They don't talk about that sometimes in the correct, or the role of the judiciary, or even how they all work together. Sometimes they get a little tripped up, and I've seen more and more where people with larger platforms are now having political correspondence, but sometimes they're even talking more so just about politics and not the bare bones basics. So I think it is, if they're going to be discussing the government, I think we need to have conversations about what the government actually does, and also the difference between the federal government and the state government. That really came out, that always comes out, natural disaster, and it came out a lot during COVID.
Yeah. Were there any life lessons that you learned, by the way, over COVID? Like the earlier times of the pandemic?
I would say, some of them were make the most of every moment. Also, some of the life lessons was you have to learn how to pivot. I had used with this platform we're on now, I'd only used it for one reason prior to COVID. Then I ended up using it all day, every day. Making the most of technology, pivoting, learning how to do something different. Those are some of the things that I learned during COVID.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Learning how to pivot. That is so important.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And you found that you were able to do that when writing your book?
Yes. Yeah, I had to do that in writing my book. Learning how to pivot, learning how to, and even different things in the contents of my book. I pivoted on that, making a lot of changes, a lot of things on the cutting room floor. But yes.
Yeah, speaking of that, because I also want to know, when it comes to civics education and your audience being, well, parents too, but definitely the young people, are there any topics that you would shy away from?
No, because I'm doing civics education. Now, I have made a decision in my children's books not to discuss politics. That is not what I want to do, because once you start discussing politics, then you have, it brings in certain types of discussions that I'm not interested in having, or it also brings in, once again, misinformation and disinformation. So I made a conscious decision to discuss civics, and there's a difference between civics and politics. And I made the decision to have an educational platform in that manner. There are other times in other capacities where I do discuss differing opinions of policy, but that's not the goal for my books. It isn't. My goal is people's favorite document. They love to pull it out, the Constitution. So saying that to say, and one thing I will understand, I understand the Constitution with a woman in mind. It wasn't written with a Black person in mind. But saying that to say that is the governing document of the United States where I live, and is the governing document of how this country functions for its government. So we need to know that part.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think that at any point you would want to tell a story about politics in the future?
It depends, maybe, but not in the Adventures of Chloe.
Not in the Adventures of Chloe and Chris.
Not in that series, and not in that series, and not in any upcoming children's books.
Yeah. Do you think that a child is ever too young to have a conversation about politics, for example?
No, I don't. Because a lot of things are based on people's opinion. It's based on the world that is around them. A lot of opinions are shaped by the world in which you live. And no, I don't think a child is ever too young to discuss politics or their own take on things. If you look at, I'll just say, a policy issue that was passed around 30 years ago, FMLA. Part of that, if you go to the history of that, some of that was based on parents needing to take leave because they had sick kids. And sometimes children, and I went to the Bill Clinton's library because this was passed when he was this was a landmark achievement of his presidency, where children were actually writing him. Children wrote him and said, I feel bad that mommy has lost her job because she has to take care of me. I get sad when mommy has to go to work and leave me with the nurses, but I understand it has to happen. So no, children aren't too young.
Wow. What key takeaways do you have that you would like to share with any debut author and any author who aspires to write a book about civics education?
Well, I would say on the debut author study, I took all of I have so many children's books around my home. I have the bestsellers. I have people that I wanted to emulate. I have copies of books. I've given a lot of them away, but I needed to get them because I needed to see the colors. I needed to see what the books were about. I needed to see what drew children in. I needed to see that type of writing. I took writing classes. I went to workshops, classes. I had buddies. I would share documents. We would have critique sessions. So I found myself in that circle too. If you're writing about civics, I think you need to make a decision on what you're going to write on. Are you going to write, for me, like I said, just factual based? Are you going to write a narrative? Are you going to write a biography of someone that has contributed to public service? Or are you going to write about policies and decision makings and do something a little bit alongside of a think tank? So I think that decision has to be made first. And if you're going to write about civics, then you have to understand it's not the sexiest topic. It's not like fashion or music or anything that gets people wowed. So you have to find a way to wow your audience and draw them in.
Ooh. Yeah, love that, Miss Hope. Do you prefer to be called? Do you like people to say Miss, or just call you by your name, madam?
My name is Hope. Is fine.
Yeah, Hope. What were some of those releases of yours that you really like? In your
What do you mean? What did you mean? What did you say?
You talked about your collection of a lot of children's books that you liked.
Yes. So I like I Am Every Good Thing. That was written by a fellow Mississippian and illustrated by Gordon James. So I got that book. Of course, The Hungry Caterpillar. Also looked at the King of Kindergarten. Looked at that book. Parker Looks Up. That was a book about a young lady that went to the museum and saw the First Lady's portrait, and she was very wowed by that. And so I looked at that, and there's also about DC, right? And Simone Visits the Museum. That was another book that I picked up. It was about a young lady from Washington, D.C. that visited the African American Museum for the first time. And then, of course, House Mouse, Senate Mouse. That's a book about the differences between the upper and lower chambers of Congress.
Wow. What would be your ideal author's roundtable?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Children or any, and alive or dead?
Any. Alive and dead, and children and non-children's books.
Okay. So if I could have like my ideal author's roundtable, of course, it would be, I would have Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, And then I would have Eudora Welty from Mississippi, and also Ann Moody from Mississippi. And then I would also have Derek Barnes. He's from Mississippi as well. And he's a children's author of Every Good Thing. I Am Every Good Thing.
Yes, I love that.
We'd have a good time.
Mm-hmm. Would you want you guys to be like eating as you're discussing, like almost like a dinner table, or it doesn't matter, or would you rather not?
I think it needs to be like maybe like a wine and cheese. We need to focus on what each other is saying. And some of the people like Toni Morrison and Dr. Angelou and Eudora Welty, like we need to have like peace and quiet, and Ann Moody, peace and quiet to hear them. But it would be something very intimate, no cameras, no, none of that, but just very, very intimate in a small space. Maybe at the new MLK library that we have in DC. It's very beautiful. And then I'd also invite Dr. Hayden, the first Black female librarian of Congress. I'd invite her to listen in.
Woo. I mean, who knows? You could write a book about that too.
Yeah, I could. I could.
On that note, Hope Goins, everybody. Hope, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to So Booking Cool today.
Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was such a pleasure, and I would love to speak with you again. And
I would love to.
Oh, great. Yeah, let everybody know how they can keep up with you, how they can get The Adventures of Chloe and Chris, 3 Branches of Government. That is out now. Again,
yes,
seller.
It is. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and Walmart online. All of those platforms. And then, of course, you can look at our website, theadventuresofchloeandchris.com.
There you guys have it. All right. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Until next time, So Booking Cool.
Thank you.